And our purpose today is to have a chat. So basically what we're looking to do is, we're about a month into this really, really weird experience where we've got blended and high flex and hybrid. Some of us are still face-to-face. Some of us are all the way online. And just kind of thinking, what do we want to talk about? What are the issues we're having? What are the venting we want to do? What are the resources and ideas we want to share? This is the purpose of our teaching chats. And I'm really excited that we're going to have one about once a month. So what's the first issue we want to discuss? Elizabeth, what do you got?
I am having difficulty keeping my students motivated. Many of them were not expecting this class to be an online class, but of course it is. And I spent a lot of time trying to think about how to make it a good experience, but I assumed that they would meet me halfway in doing a lot of the work in Canvas for that flipped class experience, so that our limited time together, we could enact things. They're not keeping up with the reading. Mm-hmm. So I would like, please, to hear a little bit about ways that we can use pop quiz functions in Canvas, or sudden pop quizzes, again, using Canvas, but during our limited class time to prevent cheating. Ways that I can dangle that little stick to hold them accountable so that our very limited time together can be more productive.
Okay, so I'm hearing a couple of questions in here, and it'll help us kind of organize our conversation. First question I'm kind of hearing is how we can use Canvas to help our students stay on track. And heads up, I'm going to ask Laura and Trina to share some of their ideas, because they're kind of our Canvas experts and being our instructional designers for that. The second issue I'm kind of hearing is how we motivate our students for the things that we do to keep them engaged when being self-paced is not necessarily a situation in which a lot of students thrive. So let's talk about that first one first, if the group will indulge that, is how can we use Canvas and our tech tricks to kind of keep our students on pace? And then the second question we'll come back to is how do we engage our students to keep up? And like I said, I'm looking at Trina and Laura, but I'm also willing to invite feedback from anyone else who has done this successfully in Canvas.
Can I just ask, has anyone done in class, although it's a Zoom class, a pop quiz in class that is directly analogous? If you were in the classroom situation, you would go to the board, you would write the pop quiz, they would write their answers down, you would collect them, there would be no cheating because you're in the room with them, and then you'd move on. And so all of that is reading accountability. Has anyone used Zoom for that function in the limited time that you have together? Don?
I have done that. Now, the issue is that pop quizzes, the way I used to do them, were spontaneous. So I used to be like, all right, right now, take out your piece of paper exactly as you said. Now I have to plan my pop quizzes. But what we do is we prepare the quiz ahead of time, and then I'll tell my students, take out a device. And my students know to bring a device they can log into Canvas to class. So take out your device, be it your laptop, your phone, whatever. The quiz is now open. It'll be open for 10 minutes. Go in and take it. And I've done that in each of my Psychoprejudice Cat community classes this semester, and it's been great. It's been really, really easy. It took us a minute to kind of figure it out, and the first time we did it, the students didn't quite know what we were asking. But since then, it's been really easy.
I think the quiz option is a good one. I also was going to ask like what your Zoom sessions look like and what you're trying to get out of them. So, and you might be able to start, there's a couple things. You might even work from an asynchronous format and have them do some type of discussion or some kind of a mandatory, sharing of information before the class meeting. But also during the Zoom, it could be more student-led. So the students could start the discussion, and that way they would really be kind of, on the forefront and kind of be called out about how much information they know right up front. So I'm kind of wondering how the
my attempts to do that have the result has been lame.
And can I tell you my pop quiz fail? So
I would love to hear your pop quiz fail. This might be a remote teaching fail video, so we'll
possibly. So this is, I do hybrid classes. I'm face-to-face a lot of the time with students in Salina. But I'm offering the option to Zoom to anyone who wants to for every class. That's another story. But so the quiz, I gave them an assignment to memorize a poem, and we'd been working on it for probably a week and a half, and they didn't think I was serious, so I asked them to take out a piece of paper and write it out from memory. And I'm having them all keep journals, notebooks, and since I don't want to collect them and pass them back out and do all that, I just asked them to photograph it and send it to me on Canvas. Well, there's a lot of holes in that plan right there. Everyone got the poem perfect, and some of them even got the punctuation, capitalization exactly perfect, the way it's supposed to be. And it's because I didn't put a time limit on it, or they all went home and took their photos. I should have had them take the photo right there in class of the paper that they wrote and submit it and make it so it was obviously done in class at that time, or time stamped at the time that happened in the class. Or I don't know, maybe I could have done something with the Canvas assignment that it was only available while class was going on. I'm not sure. So I didn't think it clear through, and everyone got a perfect score on that poem just because I didn't plan it too well.
So what's the recommendation you would offer us if you were to kind of boil that down to one succinct, compelling recommendation?
Yeah, I don't think there was anything wrong with doing it by paper and having them make a photo, but I needed the immediate thing, like what you're talking about, make it happen in class. And I could have had them text it to my phone, probably. Just use your phone to take a photo of this and send it to me right now, whether you're at home or in class. And it doesn't count outside of the 10 minutes that we're doing this or whatever. That's how I think I would do it.
So one of the things I'm hearing you advocate, and I think this is something, it's a general recommendation for all of us right now, is to be creative and flexible, right? If something doesn't work out the way you want it to, revise it, come up with a different way to do it, and then share those ideas with us so we can learn from our other experiences. So the Canvas pop quizzes are cool. They're going to work. Are there any other features in Canvas that people would kind of advocate for keeping those students motivated to stay on track with their out-of-class learning?
Well, it's not really like a Canvas feature so much as just like having them do something before coming to class. So I use the assignments and I give students whatever their reading is. I have like a little reading guide that goes with it that tells them why I chose the reading, what I want them to get out of it, how I want them to read it. So if I want them to do a deep read, if I want them to just scan for information. So I have like a little paragraph on how I want them to engage with it. And then I have just a couple of questions to have them answer. And I can either have them do that through the quiz feature in Canvas, and I'll have them do that before coming to class, or have them just turn in like an assignment on Canvas, just with the regular assignment tool, have them like write out a response to the reading or something fairly simple, but that they have to turn in. And then, depending on your class size, I don't know how much in depth you want to like go through those answers. A lot of times I'll just kind of like click through them and see, did they respond to the reading in some way, shape, or form? And I found that that's been really useful because students then know, they come to class knowing what I expect them to have gotten out of the reading. Mm-hmm. So that like, this is what we're going to talk about in class tomorrow. So make sure that you pay attention to this point. And by doing that, then they're not just like mindlessly reading over like what I've assigned to them, like, okay. And then they get to class and like, even if they read it, they don't really remember what it was that they read. So I started doing that before this whole COVID thing. And I would just have them bring it to class, in physical something to bring to class. And now I just have them do it through Canvas. And it's been really successful. I've been really amazed at just how how much my students, like, even if it's clear they haven't read all of it, like they at least know what the main points are. So it gives students who have limited time an ability to kind of shortcut. Like, I don't advocate for the shortcut, but like I want them to, at least if they can get something out of it, like that's fantastic. So
I love your idea of having that reading guide. That's not something I'd thought of before. That's a really cool idea. I also like the idea of you providing, the students providing a take home. One of the things that I'll do, and I'm surprised I haven't already talked about the 6-word essay in this one, because I always talk about the 6-word essay, is have them give the takeaway, but only give them 6 words. And what that does is it gets them to boil it down to the essence, and they're really easy to. So one of the things I tell all my students and all with teaching, and every assignment you give is going to come back. So make sure it comes back in a medium that's going to be worthwhile for you to get through. So I love the idea of guiding them and then having them produce something. And then if they haven't produced something, well, then that's going to be hard for them to engage in that class discussion. So that's awesome. Very nice.
Yeah, I love that, Andy.
Other tips that people have used in kind of using Canvas or assignments to kind of keep students engaged or on pace. We'll talk about the engagement in a second, but to keep them on pace.
I think what Andy is doing is a great way to use Canvas to prep for your synchronous sessions. Have something they're responsible for prepping and doing before class happens. Because, even when they came to campus, they didn't all do the reading before they came to lecture, right? They kind of coasted in the back of the room and didn't really answer and those kinds of things, right? So in a lot of ways, being in Zoom and being forced to do breakout rooms or whatever, they're almost more accountable, right? So we need to take these first couple of weeks of the semester to set up those expectations and let them know exactly how our live time together is going to go, right? So you can't get away with not looking at the reading. You need to read because you are being held accountable. We are going to actually talk about it during the time we're together.
Barbara, I saw your hand shoot up.
So I really firmly believe in anticipation and reflection papers. So after they read the assigned reading or watch the video or whatever the activity is, my students write a very short thing that says, this is what I took away from what you asked me to do in preparation for class, and this is what I'd like to know more about, right? And they submit that every day. Like, I asked for it the night before class. So I have the next day, that next morning, to look at it before class starts, and I can kind of see the themes. And then when I start the discussion with students, I'm responding to the things they told me they were most interested in, most concerned about, most confused about. And it makes the discussion really go well. But then I also make them respond after class. They have about 3 days usually to respond, and that is they write a reflection paper. Well, this is what happened in class that surprised me, or I was surprised by the other people's ideas, or wow, I didn't think you could come away with that perspective, but I heard it from my classmates and I'm glad I did. And I always really like it because it helps me know what I need to focus on next. And
No,
also, they're only like maximum 200 words or something. I don't put a limit on it, but I just say, I don't care how much you write, I want it to be meaningful.
So I've done similar things, and one of the things that I found with that is that my students really like them. They feel validated when they're used in the discussion, and it's a really good way to bring out students who don't feel comfortable using their voices. So the introverted students who wouldn't necessarily, jump up and provide their comment, they can provide it, and then you can advocate for their position, and that's a really good way to build their confidence. So I love what you're doing. That's amazing. What other tips are people using to keep their students on pace?
So can I have the floor again?
Oh, sorry.
I really want to know whether anybody's been using a modified fishbowl in Zoom. Because I really think if in my 80-person class, I have an 80-person class and a 10-person class, right? Like in my 80-person class, I think it would be great if I had a random 5 people who get put in the fishbowl first thing, right? So they know they have to come prepared because any one of them might end up having to lead discussion for a few minutes. Has anyone done that? Have you tried it?
I haven't, but I don't know why you couldn't. I mean, it would seem that in that case, you just identify 5 people and then they would kind of take over. Initially, I was kind of thinking about using the breakout, but then that loses the observation component of the fishbowl. But yeah, I don't see why you couldn't do that.
I think
Has
you
anyone tried
absolutely
anything
could.
like that?
I haven't done it specifically, but I think the key would be scaffolding the first few, right? To make sure that the students understand what you're expecting of them. So kind of what Andie does with those leading questions and this is what I want you to get from this reading, really helping them to understand in those first 5 or, first 2 or 3 sessions, those people have a ton of support in being those put on the spot. And then they get the rhythm of it.
You might even be able to do it with something nonsensical, right? Like ask a question like, if you could be in a TV or movie family, which one would you choose and why? Like it has nothing to do with anything, right? And you ask them to do that as a fishbowl to show how a fishbowl works. And then you do it with your class content later.
So Elizabeth is volunteering in the chat that she has done this very successfully in her class. I was wondering if you'd be willing to share that experience.
Oh, sure. So this actually was last spring, right? And so since it's essentially what we did in our advanced creative writing workshop, in which people knew they had to come prepared to talk about their peers' work, and I would start anywhere on the table, and then we would go around, and you never knew where we were going to start in the table. Well, we don't have a table, but we have Hollywood squares. And so it was an absolute direct translation from what took place in the smelly, poorly ventilated seminar room. And so it worked extremely well. I have not tried it yet without having had that initial real life pre-experience. I kind of like your idea, Barbara, of like the mock pretend kind of spoof thing. You know, which scene would you be in The Princess Bride, maybe? But when it's prepared for in real life, you know, it was a breeze. It must work this way.
Okay, now you've got me thinking about something I've seen on Zoom. It wasn't in a classroom format, but it came by way of Sally Bailey and the playback theater that they do. So Randy Mulder teaches on the intercession in the theater group, and I got to work with him after the lockdown began in March because he had a lot of tech questions, and they learned how to do performances, live improv performances on Zoom, and they were very meticulously planned. And so he would tell who to turn cameras off, or he would control the cameras as the host and everything, and made all of the actors co-hosts so they could help assume control of the room and stuff. But so I'm imagining the fishbowl would be something structured like that, where he would give the audience instructions on how to set their Zoom up, in fact. So like right now, I'm looking at the grid view of everyone instead of the speaker view. He would tell people where to go to find that and how to set that and turn that on. And so you could have the fishbowl people like that. And then have everyone, you can even have people vote in class or show agreement or disagreement just by the camera position. You turn your camera on if you agree with this statement, or turn it off if you disagree. So he would take a quick poll of 80 or 100 people that were in the audience, and he would have all of their microphones muted so they wouldn't disrupt the performance, but they could still respond in that way. So that's just a thought that occurred to me as you were describing how I didn't know what a fishbowl was, but am I getting close? Maybe.
I think you are. And actually in the chat, we're kind of sharing our own perceptions of what Fishbowl can and can't include. I had never heard this open chair aspect of the Fishbowl. I'm really glad you put that in there where someone can join the Fishbowl. One of the reservations I had about Fishbowl, and I learned about Fishbowl in the AQ teacher training course that we had done here. And in that course, the way that they pitched Fishbowl, it sounded to me like 4 students have all the fun and everyone else just passively observes. And the way they kind of set it up, one of the models they set up is once you've done Fishbowl, you don't have to do it again. So I was kind of wondering what the motivation to stay on pace was. So I really like some of the ideas that we're sharing about Fishbowl now to make them more engaging for everybody. I love that open chair part. I do have a question that made me think of this, a bit of a tangent, but it's something that's been concerning me, is the videos, the video streams. So all of my classes are either online or high flex. So I always have Zoom students, whether it's the whole class or some of them. And I've done a lot of reading over the summer about inclusive teaching and those kinds of things. And a lot of the recommendations and what I'm using in my class is you turning on your video is voluntary. If you want to share yourself and your space with me, that's fine. But if not, there's no problem. You can put up a picture. You can just put your name. You can do what you like. But what I've found, even personally, is that when I'm in a meeting and my video is off, I'm not as engaged. And one of the things that I'm kind of struggling with is I want to protect my students' identities and spaces and comfort. And I don't know their lives and they didn't invite me into their house, but I also want them to engage. So I was kind of wondering if people had kind of ideas about the video on, off, and other ways when the video is off to keep them engaged. I try to use the chat. I try to be as engaging as I can be, but this is an issue that I've struggled with. So Laura's saying use reactions, and I have had people kind of give me the thumbs up and in the applause, less the applause than the thumbs up. The problem is if you don't have the right version of Zoom, you have very few reactions. My wife has a different computer than I do. She has many more reactions that people can use than my computer, which only has the applause and the thumbs up. But that's something I've tried to use. Seeing people talking about polling, teach them to use background image so they can block out their real environment. Again, I found that different computers and different versions of Zoom don't have the same background images. For instance, on my Mac, I don't have the opportunity to use background images with the version of Zoom that my computer allows. So you get my world or don't get me. That's kind of how that works. So there are some tech limitations. And Laura's saying yes, update to the most latest version.
Yeah, definitely. But there are a few reactions that you can often get within the participants area too, raising hands and yes, no, and those kinds of things as well. It may be limited by the version of Zoom as well, but that's another location for responses. I've also heard some folks, that will kind of start their meeting asking all of the students to change their photo to something specific, right? So a photo of their pet or, something important to them or something like that to kind of make it more than just a name, right? Or change their name to something, their favorite movie character or something like that. So just to make that standard screen that we're seeing a little bit different than we keep seeing over and over again.
I love those ideas. And I'm seeing other people like Sarina telling me I need to get an update. So I'll look for that update and see if I can fix that. What other things are people having that same experience that they're having their students kind of be variably engaged when they're on Zoom? I'm seeing a lot of people nod. I think that's one of the things that, and I'll transition to our engagement question, is I have one of my classes is online. It has asynchronous component where I have a highlights and questions session with me, and I really like those. It's optional, and we record it for later for asynchronous viewing. And about 50 of my 200 students come to that, and that's I guess a pretty good yield. But I check out the video viewings for my lecture content, and those views don't make me happy. So for instance, we have our first exam coming up. And the first week was good. The first week we had more views than students. That made me happy. And then every week since, we've been about 60% of the students. And I have it's an exam, it's an unproctored exam. They can use their materials, but it's a hard exam in 60 minutes. So I've been telling them, you're not going to be able to learn this during the exam. You're going to be able to use your resources. Maybe you can organize a study guide for yourself, but you're not going to be able to do these 40 questions in 60 minutes in videos and all of these kinds of things. The highlight sessions, the first thing we talk about. And I'm having a really hard time convincing them to stay on pace. So I was just wondering if anyone had any more luck than me. And this was part of Elizabeth's early question that I heard. How do we keep them on pace in an environment where it's really, really easy to stay off pace?
So Dawn, if I can jump in,
Absolutely.
to echo a lot of your issues and maybe add a couple more that I'm having, I don't have solutions, but one thing that I have made very clear to my students in my lectures is that the exams will cover material that comes from lecture that isn't covered in the book. And so even though your exam is open book, you're not going to be able to go back through and watch the recording and find the answer for the question that came from the lecture on the exam. And I'm really hoping that that motivates attendance or viewership of lectures, because some of the material I cover is different. And again, I've tried to make that very clear. I'm guessing it might still be a little bit surprising on the first exam, and maybe things will be slightly different after that passes. To add on with additional issues that maybe we can discuss, I came here today because I'm actually having similar problems for the in-person portion of my class, where my attendance is really low in person. Now, I think part of this is due to the fact that I have a high percentage of my class in quarantine right now, so they're probably physically not able to come to class. But for each of my days, I have about 22 people that can come, and on average, I'm getting like 6.
So Sarina, is that people in class on campus or?
Yeah, so my class is high flex. And so that's people physically in the classroom with me. And then my class is broadcast live over Zoom, and I'm getting about 20 on average on Zoom Live. And then I'll have like 8 or 9 that watch it later. So it's not quite 100% when you add up those 3 groups. It's close. But I'm just a little bit disappointed by how few people are actually coming in person when you ask students and they say that they really want that option and then don't choose to take that.
We're having that same problem in some of our classes, where we have some of our classes are high flex, and we have, like, when we've gone to do the high flex classes, we have some classes where only like 2 or 3 students have shown up. One of my instructors told me that she had nobody come to her high flex class and they all attended on Zoom. So like that, I don't have a solution except to offer like my sympathy, and that we're also struggling with that. And then we have also some students who have been complaining, and students from out of state who are paying in-state tuition with the idea that they have this in-person possibility, and then they come to class and they're the only one there, or they're one of like 2 or 3, and then it's just not productive.
One problem I'm having that's related to that is I am also having fewer students coming. I do have a lot of students, like a quarter of my students are quarantined right now. And I know that's part of it, but the other problem is the students in class feel burdened to carry the discussions because the people on Zoom aren't participating. And I'll even call out specific names on Zoom to ask their opinion, and it's crickets. Like, I know they're totally not paying attention. And I'm not sure how else, I mean, I would think embarrassment would be enough, but apparently that's not enough to get them to participate. And I have them do quizzes before they come to class to make sure they review the material. And at this point, I'm not sure how else to include them and engage them in the class so that everyone feels like they're involved. It's not just the people who are in class participating.
So Clarissa, I have some thoughts on that though. I'm trying to transfer some in-person experience to Zoom because I'm about to try this flex with some students. I've found that my students as a class are less likely to speak up even in class. And I think just the fact that they're wearing a mask makes them feel like speaking up is harder. Just if they had a mask off, they'd talk. And if they have a mask on, they're less likely to. Or other students are just a little anxious about speaking up. So what has helped my class is to have them even 6 feet away. I've told them, swivel your chair, but don't move. Talk to the person next to you about XYZ question. And then I call in the partners. And I don't tell them you need to pick a reporter for the class or anything, but I say, Omar and Jose, what did you talk about? And I have found, at least with this group of students, that if I call in two specific people, the pressure's enough that someone will respond. But if one person's really hesitant, the other person usually takes the lead. So I'm wondering if that might work with Zoom, or even put them in a breakout room or something like that and have them come back together once in a while. But they're reporting to the whole class, especially when they're not physically present, might just be daunting to them. So if they're able to talk with somebody else first, they might be able to. And like Elizabeth put in the chat, if attendance is low, it may be due to these infection rates that students are just less comfortable attending. So it might be worth, I think, Andie, you were posing this question, asking your students explicitly what their modality preference is at this point and why. That's something I've done with my students to find out, what's your health and safety comfort? What's your learning style preference? What's your, time management? And then that may lead to some individual conversations. I just did a quick Qualtrics survey and had my students take it today to find out what do you prefer and why, so that I can kind of address those issues. And that might answer some questions as to why students are coming or not coming to class, because that burden of that in person can be a big deal. So sorry, I talked for a while.
I know those are good ideas, Melissa. I was just thinking, I do actually have them always work in small groups first before they go to the larger group, because even in person classes, students don't want to talk until they've talked to someone else. Yeah.
I think one of the things that I'm kind of struggling with is when I think about the issues, I'm having different issues at different class levels. So one of my classes is a very large, predominantly first-year student class, an intro psychology class. Another is a cat community where they learn and live together, which creates lots of trouble when you're dealing with, say, infection. And then I have a graduate course. And there's a lot of different situations that I'm kind of dealing with, and I have to wrap my mind around each of those different issues. So with the first year students, and a lot of research in online teaching kind of shows that first year students and first generation students don't necessarily know about college yet. So they don't do well kind of in a self-paced sort of environment. So I'm trying to coach them along as well as I can. In the CAT community, a lot of it is building community. I'm having a hard time building community when everyone has moved apart and now half the class is attending in Zoom because they're quarantined. And then the graduate course, there's a lot of people who are in different situations. There's now childcare issues that many of my other students aren't experiencing, and they're having all of these things that are stretching them thin. And you combine that with all the issues each of us is facing with our own individual situations as teachers. And it's almost like, information and emotional overload to kind of keep all of these things set and all of these variables to provide the best educational experience that I can. And one of you said earlier, you want the students to meet us halfway. I don't think they're able to meet us halfway right now. I think they're able to commit some, but I don't think they're able to commit the way they could before. By the same token, I don't think that we're able to commit maybe the way that we had done before with all these other things getting in the way. And I think demoralizing is the term I would use. I'm having a lot of conversation with people where we're working harder, but we're doing less well. And that is really a hard kind of juxtaposition that we're dealing with. So I'm kind of wondering, just, for my own sanity, what are y'all doing for self-care? What are y'all doing to kind of keep up with this emotional burden that our students are going through and that we're going through ourselves? What do we do? What are we doing?
I have something I'll share with you. So I'm team teaching. There's one class that there are 6 of us that have different sections of the same class, and then we have a concurrent meeting of the larger group once a week. And there are several of us that attend each other's personal sections as well. We're just usually in groups of 2. But we kind of have each other's back. We're just being in the room with them is a support. Just having my friend there, she doesn't even really have to say anything. She can grade or whatever, but just being there for backup is kind of nice.
I like that idea. I'd be nervous to ask any of my colleagues for any more than they're already doing right now. And if people are able to do that, if anyone wants to come to my classes, be my guest.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's something that I would ever feel comfortable reaching out to someone to do right this second because of all of the things that are burdening people.
It's a pretty special situation for sure.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that you have that.
I'd like to say something just real quick. I'm not teaching, but I work with a lot of students like as an advisor. And one of the things I discovered last semester, I started getting reports from other advisors and teachers that my students weren't attending, they weren't checking in on Canvas. And so I started telling the students, you know, the computer keeps track of every time you log into your classes. You have to log into the classes or your attendance grade just plummets. That's why you're not doing well in your class. And my students were shocked. Like they had no idea. So in my mind, just kind of throwing that out there, you know, guys, I'm really disappointed in the number of times you guys are logging in and doing work. I can see this. I get the stats. So you might want to keep that in mind because I have to grade you on, you know, participation and attendance. Sometimes just letting them know that they are being watched will help with maybe a little better participation or a little bit more, you know, working on the units on their own time.
Mm-hmm.
I'll throw that out there.
No, I like that. And I think it's one of the things that I try not to do as an instructor, but I probably do much more than I should, is I fail to empathize with what my students do and don't know. And, you know, I might assume, well, of course Canvas charts your logins, but they may not know that. So I think sharing that information with them is great. And I know that I myself as a student, I always wanted to check my boxes and have my instructor think I was doing the things I were doing. There's always ways to game some of that, but I think getting them into Canvas is a good starting point. So what else have people done to manage this situation for themselves and for their students? And yes, a couple of people are advocating for therapy in the chat. I absolutely recommend that if you have mental health concerns, there are people that can help you with that. So definitely take advantage of those opportunities should you require them. Absolutely. The chat is blowing up right now, so I'm trying to catch up.
People are talking a bit about communication, and I thought it was really interesting. I've had a few discussions with instructors, and one thing they said surprised me. I just hadn't really thought about it, but they said after their Zoom session, they've just stayed logged in and given students an opportunity to stay there after class with them, very much as if you were in the classroom, that you would stay after and welcome that participation. And a lot of the instructors have said how pleasantly surprised they've been, how many people will stay on and chat, whether it's about the content or just kind of about their learning environment and the situation right now. So.
And I'll add to that, and I picked this up from one of you, either Laura or Trina this summer and picking it up, but one of the other things that I do with my sessions with my students is I tell them I'm going to stop the recording at some point at the end. So if anyone wants to ask me a question that they don't want to be part of the archive for that class that others can see, that you can stay around. And I found that those conversations have been amazing. Because a lot of times the students can ask something a little bit more personal, something that, you know, maybe admits a little bit more confusion than they would have otherwise. So I highly recommend that too.
One recommendation that one of my colleagues gave me that I thought was a great idea is that she sets up her Zoom classroom so that there is a password that the students need, but she doesn't have to be there. And so that the students can log in and they will start chatting before class, and then she'll enter like right as class is starting, and there'll already be like a moment for the students to, like she said, every time I walk in, that the students are like having a conversation amongst themselves. And she said it's really built like a lot of that class community that is really been, I think, lacking for a lot of us, where they're not able to really like have those conversations when the professor isn't in the room. And I think that that's a really good thing too, because we've been talking about how breakout rooms can be really awkward for students. And a lot of our students are having this like they get really anxious about them, and so like being able to build that class community makes the breakout rooms less anxiety inducing, and then also telling the students who they're going to be with in the breakout rooms so that they're not like just suddenly somewhere with who knows who. So those have been a couple of things that we've been talking about that I think are really great ideas.
Those are fabulous. I love that, Andie. So what else are people either struggling with or really succeeding with? Because really both of those are great. The conversations I've had with people more have been about the struggles and the successes, but I would love to hear both. So what are people experiencing?
I'll chime in, and there was early on, if this got talked about, I apologize, as I was kind of distracted with some other things like our students are oftentimes, right? I started, because I have a couple large classes, and so the normal in-class engagement, because I have part of them on Zoom and part of them in person, you know, that changed. And so I started using Poll Everywhere. And I guess I'm a firm believer in having what I call some teeth in the things we do. I think, yes, they're young adults, not all of them are, you know, but I still think you gotta bring them along, and they have to be accountable to that. And, you know, they may be able to still pass the class without engaging, but that it's going to hurt them or help them, you know, with the things that you have. And so I think sometimes you can be successful with the just, hey, this is good for you. This is why you should do this. This is why you should watch this, or, you know, you can say that. But I think when you lead them along with what I call the teeth in the system of points or a portion of the grade or whatever, then I guess I'd like to think that helps. And so the Poll Everywhere stuff I do is, you know, you can just ask them questions, or what points are muddy, or have, okay, a concept that we just went over, what's the right or wrong answer for this? Give them credit just for participating, give them credit for getting the right answer. And I have those kind of things built into that. I like it from the standpoint that it doesn't cost the students anything. Now, when it cost me $350 to do it over 2 classes, and that's for up to 700 students across my 2 classes that are engaging, that are registered on that. I think it's if you're under 40, I think you could do it for free. Okay, so it's no cost to you, no cost to the students. And it integrates with PowerPoint really easily. And I know there's other things out there you can do, but I like it. And I hadn't done it until I felt like I had to do it this semester. And I feel like it works well for what I'm trying to get out of it. Get students to engage, make sure they're staying with me, whether they're on Zoom or in person, those kind of things.
So Karol, in the chat, we're wondering what the name of the app was. A couple of us had missed at the beginning.
Poll Everywhere.
Poll Everywhere. Okay. And Laura had your back. She put that in there. So thank you, Laura.
And there's a lot. Trust me, I am not a technologically advanced person, and so there's a lot of things I'm probably not using correctly or that efficiently, or streamlining it with Canvas. I'm not really doing that. I'm relying on TAs to kind of help me navigate some of that stuff. So
I will say, because as I look on this, the top row of people I see are either my current or my former TAs. Our TAs are amazing. And I think it's one of those things where we've got to let them help us sometimes. And I tend to be a bit of a micromanager, as any of my TAs will tell you. And we've got to delegate now in ways we haven't before. And I don't know much about tech either, but my TAs do, and they can make some wonderful that I'm not even sure how that magic happened. But I think letting them help us and using those skills and their energy and their passion is amazing now too. So thank you to all of my amazing TAs, and just name them so that all the rest, you know, I'm talking to Ashley Schiffer, Tucker Jones, and Noah Rankin. They are amazing, amazing people, and I'm very lucky to work with them. They make me look a lot better than I would look on my own. So it's great to do that. But I am all about the easy apps that don't really take a lot of technology to make work. So I appreciate that. And Tucker, one of those amazing TAs, is actually talking about Kahoot. Tucker, you want to talk about Kahoot real quickly?
Sure. So Kahoot, I don't think has a quite the same amount of capabilities as Poll Everywhere, but it is a free kind of online gaming platform where you can use it to get quick responses from students, to get responses to polls. You could use it as an online quiz feature. And students can just log in. If they're in class, they can use their phone. If they're at home, they can use their computer. It's a pretty fun application. We've used it in a couple of different classes, and I think it's free. So it's a good option, I think, for students to use.
I think Kahoot is very popular, like at the high school level. So a lot of your students might know it from, K through 12 experiences.
So I'd also suggest that right now is a really great time for you to survey your students if you haven't yet, or you may have done an initial one of what's your bandwidth, right? Where do you even have internet? Those kinds of things at the very beginning. But now ask them how it's going, right? We talked about the only 3 students are showing up in class. Why are folks not coming in person? What's going on for them? Are they quarantined, or are they just not feeling safe on campus, right? One of my sons, it turned out all of his classes except one went fully online. And so he talked to that one professor and he said, it doesn't make sense for me to come to campus, right? Because all my other classes are online. So is it okay for me to just join by Zoom? And some of your students may not be asking, right? He took the initiative to ask, but a lot of them may just be choosing the Zoom action. So that can help you to decide if it just makes sense to just go straight to Zoom. But you may have those students where that one-on-one interaction, that being in person is really critical for them. And so I think someone earlier said, maybe you invite them to go ahead and come every day. If that student, that's really important for them, let them come every day rather than splitting their schedule, right? But then check in with them on, what's working for them in your class, what's not working for them, what are they struggling to find, those kinds of things. But then also maybe be a bit of a thief. What are they liking about their other classes? Not what they're going to come, don't make it be a bitch fest where they're telling you what's wrong with all the other classes, but is there a tool one of their other teachers is using that they really like? Is one of their other teachers doing breakout rooms in a way that really works for them? And maybe get ideas from others on how, from the student perspective, that is working well. And that could really help you move forward.
I'll kind of add to that Greg Eislein, who many of you know, our director of K-State First, wonderful English professor, great friend of mine. He won the Case Award a couple of years ago, which is an amazing national award. It's not just a K-State award, it's a national award. And he loved to say that K stands for copy and steal everything. And if you can find an idea that's going to work for you, that's great. It's not kind of the same as with research where everything is cited and stuff like that. But if you hear a wonderful idea, use it. So I'm just going to say that we all should be thieves appropriately in teaching.
I wanted to add to the idea of surveying too. There was a colleague, I was at a conference, and they had created a 3-part survey system for all of their courses that was working really well for them. This is pre-COVID, but I think it still applies. So like the first third of the semester, they were asking about the course design. Can you find all the information you need? Is it the layout makes sense? All those types of things, syllabus, that kind of thing. The second third of the semester, they had the student reflect on their own engagement. And they asked them several questions about what their engagement level was, if they've been in contact with the instructor, they know their performance level, that type of thing. And then the last third of the class, they talk about assessment, and the survey goes out about assessment techniques used, whether the assessments used are helping, showing their true knowledge of the content, that type of thing. So they had these, and the students knew they were coming for each course, so that helped too.
Would you actually
Be
mind
afraid to
filing that
pivot.
progression into the chat? Would that be okay, Trina?
I'm sorry, what?
Would you drop that progression of what the first third and the second third and the third third are in the chat?
Sure.
I think that's a wonderful thing for us to kind of use as a model.
So another thing I wanted to say was don't be afraid to pivot, right? Communicate with your students, make sure that they know that something's changing, but it's okay, especially this semester, just like we had to in spring semester. If it's not working, don't stick with it just because that's how you laid it out in your syllabus, right? You know, do what's going to be best for you and for your students. Give yourself grace, give your students grace, and find the path that's going to work best this semester.
I love that, Laura. Thank you for saying that. One of the things I'm going to add to that is understand we're going to mess up, right? So kind of giving that grace. And if you mess up in a really funny way, make a video for us. We have a remote teaching fails video series. We have a couple videos come out already. We have a lot more videos coming. If you want to give us, you know, a 1 to 2 minute description of what you did and what went wrong, we would love to promote that. Because one of the things I think we need to be doing is to find some humor when things don't go quite right. You know, if something was tragic and really just kind of pitiful, you know, I'm sorry about that, but we're trying to just kind of inspire people with kind of our failures. So watch for those, and a couple of you might get an invitation to do some of these after the conversation we've had today, because we've really enjoyed listening to you do that. So in the time we have left, we have about 9 minutes left. Kind of wild card round. What do you want to talk about that we haven't talked about yet? Elizabeth.
Well, I did put it into the chat. We're about
Okay.
to enter midterms in my life. And I was rather alarmed to learn yesterday how much academic misconduct had soared last spring. And I'm sure a lot of it has to do with stress. All stress is not gone from our lives this fall. And so that may continue to be a chronic and not just an acute problem. And so I really would. I'd like to hear a little bit about people's thoughts, strategies, etc. That doesn't involve only massive grading of long essays on the instructor's part.
And I'll add to that as kind of a condition, something that's not going to create great cost to the students or unrealistic amounts of work in other ways for us as faculty. So what can we do?
I personally, I mean, I don't have huge courses, but 130 some in one course. And so you can't do assessments, you know, they have to be online because I can't physically have everybody in one place at a time. And, you know, I decided I don't think it's worth the time and the effort to have where I'm ensuring that they don't have somebody in the background helping them with the answers or their book down in front, you know. And so I just am saying, okay, you know, you can have access to resources, but we're doing it in a 60-minute time period. And then I hope that my exam is sufficiently challenging enough that if they had to look up a bunch of the answers, then they're probably not going to do very well because they don't have enough time. And so I think creating it that way. And then I do have a couple short answer essay that between myself and the TAs, you know, we grade, each of us grades one of those. So it's not an extraordinary amount of grading. But then I balanced the difference, you know, what I used to have more heavily weighted on the exams, I weight more heavily on some of this poll everywhere, this in-class participation, another video project that we do, because I think, and I just got done with the first exam and the average was a 76%. And so it really ended up being about the same as what I would have under normal circumstances. And so, you know, that I just think it is what it is. And but I don't want to play the game of, do they have their browser locked down, or can I see that they've got any, you know, monitoring through a web camera and stuff like that? To me, that's a bunch of headaches. And I think most students are honest, but I'm not going to go to extraordinary efforts to catch that percentage that isn't. I'm going to come from the angle that I think most are doing the right things or do the right things most of the time. And I'm going to cater more to that. And I know that I'm going to have some people that are less than honest. But I hope that the other things that we do, you know, make them maybe not do as well as they would because they've taken shortcuts. Now, whether I can actually say that, I don't know, but that's what keeps me sane, is taking that approach.
I'm doing about the exact same thing that you are in doing my exam, so I won't restate all of that. But one of the things I'm going to highlight that I really like is by letting our students know they can use resources. What we're doing is we're not putting the dishonest students at an advantage.
Right.
And I don't want the students doing it right to get screwed for doing it right. So in a situation where I can't make sure you're doing it right, I'm going to let you all use your resources. And that's something I want to highlight because it took me a while, to be honest, when I was going through it, like saying, do I want it to be open book, open note? And it just made too much sense to me because I didn't want the honest students to be at a disadvantage.
Yep.
So I love that you're doing it. I just wanted to highlight that aspect.
So can I just add, I think it's important to recognize that a long time ago before COVID, I did courses with online exams and they were basically just open book. But you still had to know enough to get done in time, right? You couldn't look up everything like we were talking. But I think the most important transition we're going to have to make now is to start to see that learning, using some kind of system to learn what students know how to use in the knowledge they've gained in your class is the key. So if they can solve a problem with the knowledge they know, then they've learned it well enough. They don't have to tell us on a multiple choice answer, right? But if they can solve a problem, then they've learned to use the knowledge, and that's probably more important than being able to regurgitate it. So it really is just, we have to change what we ask them to show us, and then we have to be able to write those kinds of questions. And one of the things I've learned in doing that is if you give students choices, you say you have to answer 3 of the following 10, right? And they're all application about different aspects of the knowledge. Then if they can do all, any 3 of the 10, well, then they've learned enough. And you've, like you just go, okay, yep, they got it, right? I don't know, that's my theory.
I was just going to say something similar to that I think that having a question that is about like reflecting on like what has been most meaningful about like what you've learned and how would you apply it in other situations. So I think that application is really, it shows deep understanding and not just that they crammed for an exam and can reproduce what you taught them. And that gives an advantage to the students that are really engaging in a meaningful way with your content rather than just like kind of going through the motions. So, and also giving them a chance with the reflection to think about like what they're doing well to kind of help promote that autonomy in learning.
And there has been a little bit of research on this, that it's more inclusive to allow your students to choose from a set and then to show you they can perform rather than to expect everyone to do exactly the same memorized list of everything.
So a couple of questions that come up in the chat that I want to at least briefly address. One of them is Elizabeth's point about preparing to teach in one modality is about all we can handle. And I think we really do, to echo Laura's earlier point, we have to be kind to ourselves. So when we're thinking about how we're going to be teaching in January, which is due this week, none of us know what January is going to look like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the modality that I'm most comfortable teaching in, regardless of what the situation is. I'm not going to try to predict the future. I'm going to say, what do I think I can do well in January? And if that turns out to be what I can do, great. If I need to change it based on the situation at the time, that's fine too. I'm not going to get too bogged down in that. And this dovetails into the other question about the administrative response and kind of what we're facing and all the responsibilities and things. And does that make us less able to stand up for the things we should be standing up for in the COVID response, et cetera? I will say that number one, and this is me being in a very stable position. I'm a full professor, right? If someone tells me I can't change my modality, I'm going to say, well, I'm going to change it if I have to. I'm just going to do that. And I think if I'm doing it with my students' experiences as that motivation, I'm going to look people in the eye and tell them I did it, tell them why, and hope for the best. And I think that our administration is going to be as kind as they can to us if we're doing what we think we should be doing for the situation, no matter what I put in the Excel spreadsheet this week. So that's what I'm going to say for that. On the other side, I will say, and I know Elizabeth can back me up on this, we're pushing back on a lot of things as faculty and as staff right now, and a lot of these decisions. And we are voicing our concerns directly to the president and provost and whoever else we can get to listen to us. So I think that faculty are going to pride themselves on standing up for what they think is right, and I don't think we've been hampered in that ability. Now, we don't have the ability to make decisions. We have shared governance, but we are not autonomous in making those decisions. But will make those concerns known in the best way that they can. And administration has
It's the administration.
So if everyone else has lost Don, I will back him up right now and say, if you don't know this, Don is the co-chair of the Faculty Senate's Faculty Affairs Committee and is a marvelous voice for faculty concerns. And as you do discover real problems and challenges with what you're being asked to do in delivering your courses, he is a wonderful person to bring those concerns to, not just to help you with your work, but to bring those concerns to administration. He's a very strong voice. If you don't know who the faculty senator is that represents your unit, please make it your point after this meeting to find out who that person is, and be sure that you are funneling your concerns upward, because it is true. We in the Senate are trying very hard to represent and to push back.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. So Don likes using cliffhangers to get people's attention, but not quite to that extreme, I think. So he just texted me, he got kicked out, so he's very sorry for that. But thank you all for being here today for our first teaching chat. We're going to try and do this about once a month, and out of respect for everybody's time, if there are any additional questions you have, you can reach us at the Teaching Learning Center's email address, or you could email me directly at tuckerj@ksu.edu. We will be hosting another one of these again very soon, and next week we will be having Tanya Gonzalez talk about social justice in the classroom, so we hope to see you there. And if you are participating for credit in our professional development series, just a friendly reminder that the teaching chats do not count towards the professional development certificate. This is just an opportunity for us all to get together and kind of work on some issues that we are all experiencing. So thank you again so much for being here today. And I will let Don know that Elizabeth did a great job finishing his thought.